Very much about this that is surprising about the way the Egyptian authorities conduct the whole issue of press freedom. We know that they don't stand for it.
Right. You're right. It's not very surprising. This is entirely consistent with a quasi-authoritarian government. This is not anything new, right? In some ways, the Sisi government is a continuation of the earlier Mubarak government. I actually did my dissertation on Egypt almost a decade ago, and in that dissertation, I talked about advice calls that government officials like to give to these media personalities and newspaper editors and so on and so forth, essentially suggesting this is how you want to approach this issue, right? And it's not really advice as much as it is kind of a command, right? And the consequences are understood, the consequences of not complying with these commands. So this is pretty consistent with Egyptian government behavior, and it's consistent with the Sisi government, as you alluded to in your intro.
So press freedom is obviously doesn't really exist in Egypt, never has, actually, according to you. What else do these leaks of this recording of this senior intelligence officer talking to media personalities in Egypt, what else do they reveal?
I think the bit about Jerusalem is really interesting. I would argue that it's also not surprising. It's not surprising that the government is, on the one hand, telling the Egyptian public one thing, right, that they support the Palestinians, and then behind the scenes, working the back channels, essentially supporting the Israeli government. The Sisi government has a relatively long history of working with the Netanyahu government in Israel. This goes back to 2013, 14, and 15. In 2016, there was a very interesting diplomatic visit by Egypt's foreign minister to Israel, and they held that meeting in Jerusalem. It kind of flew under the radar. It was only reported by a few news outlets, but this was a signal to the Israeli state that Egypt was shifting its long-standing policy and that it was willing to bend on this issue of Jerusalem.
Mohamad Elmasry, thank you very much indeed for joining us.